Ever wish you had someone to talk to anytime, anywhere, no matter what you're going through? Meet PsychPal, your 24/7 AI companion designed to help you process your thoughts, calm your mind, and keep you moving forward. Chat anytime during a panic attack, on a restless night, or just when you need to vent. Prefer talking instead of typing? Try voice journaling. PsychPal listens, transcribes, and truly understands. You can even upload screenshots of tough conversations and it'll help you unpack how they made you feel. PsychPal keeps life organized too. It can add appointments to your calendar, track your mood, and even summarize your sessions for your therapist so you'll never lose progress. Plus, built in crisis resources are always just one click away. It's a privacy first, constantly evolving, made to complement your professional care, not replace it. Ready to try it out? Head over to the link in this episode and use my code Pete at checkout to get 20% off your first month subscription to PsychPal. PsychPal, because your mind deserves a companion too.
That's how you want last time. I don't wanna be normal, you know I will not die. You can shine in my mortal so you can kill my time. All the times that I've sold, still got my pedal through the metal. Told you I'll be immortal, that's how you want last time. I don't wanna be normal, so you can stay inside. That's why they say that you're local, you see this world is mine. I'm not leaving you hope for them time. I'm taking mode, I'm loading, I will show them one more. So that's how you want last time. I don't know what's so hard, can you get it through your mind?
Hello, welcome into an exciting episode of Pete for Exciting. My guest today is a certified clinical hypnotherapist, medical hypno specialist, NPO practitioner, and the founder of the Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy. He is also the author of the book Past Lives Guidebook. Please welcome in the one, the only Craig Meriwether. Craig, welcome in.
Pete, hello. How are you? Thank you so much for inviting me onto your show.
I'm doing great, Craig. So, Craig, why don't you tell everybody a little more about yourself? I mean, we gave that great entrance, but, what are some things they may not know about you?
Well, long story short, I guess. I grew up in the church, the Episcopal Church, kind of born into the Episcopal Church. It's just the church that was up the street from, where I grew up. So if it was a Methodist church or a Lutheran church, we would have been Lutheran or Methodist, but just happened to be Episcopalian. And if people aren't familiar with the Episcopal Church, it's sort of Catholicism light. And that was a big part of my world growing up. And starting in 6th grade to 12th grade, I went to a Baptist-run school. So I kind of had these two very different kind of philosophies and theologies around Christianity growing up. And that was the entirety of my life, basically. All my friends went to church or obviously to the schools I went to. And that was a big part of growing up. The other part of growing up was the depression and anxiety I was struggling with. And this is the 1980s, so there's no internet, there's no SSRI drugs like Prozac. Those didn't come out till the late 1990s. So really in the 1980s, all you had was whatever book you might be able to find at the library or the bookstore, and whatever talk therapist you might find in the Yellow Pages. Or if you somehow would ask somebody what their recommendation was for a talk therapist, which of course you're not going to do back in the early 80s. And so it really was just kind of struggling through it and suffering through it as a teenager. And as I got in my 80s, I moved to a small town and went to school and university. And, as you learn more about the world, learn more about other people and where they come from and their philosophies of life, and listen to their music, and there's festivals on the weekends, and you start learning more about their spiritual beliefs. And so it was sort of this slow drip of learning about the world, as well as learning about myself, understanding more about what I was going through and how to deal with it. 1990s, the personal growth movement got really big. Tony Robbins became super huge. And so in trying to find a way out of this kind of issue fog of anxiety and depression I was struggling with, I started doing a lot of personal growth, self-help stuff. I was doing some talk therapy here and there, but I didn't really feel that was helpful because I didn't know what the problem was. And so I was doing a lot of, personal growth stuff.
Well, you have
And
to remember, though, the 80s, they didn't know much about this stuff. So a lot of this stuff, it was still new to them,
yeah,
You're
yeah.
trying
I
to
mean, even,
diagnose these things. A lot of that stuff didn't exist at your time, So, like, you're basically going in the unknown. You don't know what's going on. So when you're going to
yeah,
therapy, you're expecting to, like, they're going to help you figure out what it is you're dealing with, or what is it what is the issue I'm having, so I know how to better attack it. But at that point, you both are kind of guessing at that point, because they didn't really know much, and you obviously
Yeah.
didn't know much because you're a teenager at the time. You don't know any of
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. You only had limited resources of what you can know, so you can only look up based on what the symptoms you're having are, and that could be a million different things at the time, versus today where you have like you can go to Chat GPT, start looking up certain things and get a better idea, which is still a scary place to be. I mean, but
Yeah.
it's interesting though because a lot of people when it comes to spiritual, they get a little thrown off by it because it just depends like how it's been presented to them. Like I know my personal experience at first was it was a horrible experience because everybody I met we always just like try and force feed it to you, and it's like yeah I don't take things that well. It's different when you're sitting or having an actual conversation with me, let me ask the questions I have, and just getting answers that the best of the person can give me. Okay, it's a little different. I have questions of things. I'm just kind of curious things. You see a lot of people that get super fanatical. A lot of times that's what it's portrayed as. People are super fanatical. This and all these other like wild things that movies and TVs these days will put out there for you, and it's really not what it's like. And I laugh every time I see some of them too because it's just so funny because it's over dramatized for a lot of people, and it's just like, oh God, you don't need to stop. It's like you're making this look worse than it has to be. I mean, religion's a great thing. There's nothing wrong with having a higher power of some sort. Everybody had a higher power of some sort. You think about it, the Indians had their own separate gods for everything. The Greeks and the Romans all had all different gods for different things. You know what I mean? However you did it, there was something higher up there that you were talking to and that you were praising and things like that too. And you prayed to and just, and things like that too. And I think that that's where a lot of stuff gets muddled when it came to a lot of stuff like that. For me, it was just like the way it was presented is just like it's off putting to me now. I am a man of faith now, but it's like I don't force feed it on anybody. Like I'm like I tell people, God has a plan for everybody. You may not understand the plan, but none of us will. I don't think any of us ever will. That's the great thing about it is like you just have to trust that He has your best intentions, which most times He does. Some people may
Yeah.
not see it that way, but that's their own opinions. That's the great thing about being human. We have our own opinions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you hit on a really important aspect of what's going on nowadays. We get so much of our stuff either through uh Chat GPT, some of the AI stuff, obviously not just
Yeah,
Chat GPT,
yeah.
there's like 30 of them. But
Social media.
yeah, and social media. And obviously there's a huge bias of even just the algorithm of whatever you happen
Hmm.
to look at,
Hmm.
the people you like and all that stuff that's going to feed you a certain viewpoint. Whereas what was fascinating to me as now I look back upon it in this it was in Santa Cruz, which is right near San Francisco. It's right near Silicon Valley. And so it just had people from around the world. And of course, going to university, you're learning so much about everything. And every weekend seemed to be some sort of fair or festival. And then you take a Zen meditation class. And we lived in a house, my girlfriend at the time, well, now wife, we lived in the back house. And the front house was a group of guys who were studying Pencak Silat, which is a Indonesian martial arts.
Oh, okay.
And the kind of head guy, teacher guy, was a 6'2" Irish redheaded guy, and he was learning Indonesian martial arts. And it's just that was in the front of the house, and so you're just surrounded by all this stuff, and you're learning about it. And what I found is, of course, I had my limited view. This is the 1980s. You didn't, as I was growing up, you didn't have the internet. Internet was in what, 96, 97 when it started coming
Hmm.
out with our
Yeah.
15 point modems, and it took 12 hours to download a picture and all that. But it's just, again, it's like whoever you met or again, whatever street fair you went to or festival or something. And what was fascinating to me about Santa Cruz is there was something like 7, 8 bookstores just in that downtown area. If anybody knows Santa Cruz, there's that kind of 3 blocks wide and maybe 10 blocks long of the downtown. And back in the day, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there was like 7, 8 bookstores. There was like 16 movie screens, most of them which were art house movie screens, all sorts of different cafes or restaurants. You just walk down the street, you see all your friends and chit chat, all sorts of different music coming through because it's right near San Francisco, between San Francisco and LA. So a lot of the bands would just stop off one more night and play Santa Cruz. So my worldview just started to widen. It was a slow drip, certainly, but my worldview started to widen, and it's sort of like going to the spiritual bookstore. I was like,
Hmm.
well, I only like this one little section because that's all I understand, and this other stuff about angels and past lives and reincarnation and whatever else is in there, It's like crystals. I say, I don't know. That's nonsense. And I don't understand it. I don't like it. And then as I learn more, as I understand more about other people's cultures, that just kind of widens more and more. And so what was interesting about the 90s is, especially later in the 90s, when the Prozac and all the other SSRI drugs started coming out, the conversation opened about depression
Mm-hmm.
and feeling that anxiety. Before, you kind of really didn't talk about it, you just hit it. But
Yeah.
now it's Oprah, it's on Phil Donahue, it's on the Merv Griffin show. You talk about it with your doctor, you talk about it with your friends. And it was okay to be depressed, and it was okay to talk about it. And so that conversation opened up in my realm of study, kind of before all that happened. I was getting, like I said, personal growth stuff. And one of the things that they were always talking about was hypnotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
And hypnotherapy, there's a whole different conversation right there just about the unfortunate misconceptions and myths about hypnotherapy. It's not mind control, it's not
Yeah,
brainwashing.
we've covered that with a few guests prior to this interview,
Um,
where we touched on a few of those things, though. Where it's
yeah.
like they were saying that, like, people think you're just going to get hypnotized, and people are going to think, and it's not even like that. It's not even what it's for. It's not even what people are using it for these days.
No, hypnosis is just that alpha brainwave state.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple times a day, we all move in an altered state of consciousness, of that daydreamy state. You're bored at work, you're at a meeting at work, and your mind drifts off. Oh, if I was in this meeting, I could be getting that project done that's due on Thursday. Or, oh, I got family coming in this weekend. Oh, I gotta get the house cleaned up. I better get the refrigerator full. You start thinking about something else. Whether you remember high school math class, you remember that chemistry class in
Mm-hmm.
college, and your mind would just drift off. Teachers still talking, but you don't hear them anymore. Kids asking questions or whatever, you're just staring out the window, thinking about the weekend and how much fun you're going to have with your friends. You've altered your state of consciousness being bored back in high school math class, or that meeting at work, or you're driving home. You ever had this experience, driving home from work or from picking up the kids or from school or shopping or whatever? And you start thinking about, oh, I got that meeting on Friday. I need to get the PowerPoint done. And all of a sudden you're in your driveway, you're in your garage, you're in your parking spot. You don't remember the last 5 or 6 blocks.
Mm-hmm.
You yourself have altered your state of consciousness. You put yourself in the hypnosis state. And there's nothing magical or mystical about it. It's just moving down in the alpha brainwave state. Literally, the biology of it is how fast your brain is processing information.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And right now, when, like, you and I, or P, we're in this conversation, we're having a discussion, we're listening to each other, we're in this present moment, focused in this present time, we're firing about 18, 20 cycles per second in the beta brainwave state. Well, if I just drift off, I start thinking about, oh, okay, the to-do list I got to get done today, and work and all the things I got to get done. Well, I've just altered my state of consciousness,
Yeah.
slowed down how fast my brain is processing information, how fast it's shooting the little electrical pulses to each of the brain cells. And now I'm firing about 12 cycles per second. I'm in the alpha brainwave state. Maybe I'll just really zone out, and I'm not really asleep and not really awake. I moved into theta brainwave state, and then I'm just like, my head starts slowing down. I'm falling asleep. I'm moving into the delta brainwave state. And then let's say I'm back in high school math class, and the teacher's like, "Hey, Craig, why don't you come up here and do the problem on the board?" I'm like, wake up, I look around, and everybody's staring at me. I'm embarrassed. And I don't know how to do the problem on the board. I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
And, now I'm stressed, and everybody's staring at me. And now I'm firing about 30 cycles per second because I'm in the fight or flight stress response. Well, I've just altered my state of consciousness, went 3 or 4 times in about 10 minutes, just being bored in high school math class. This is something we do every day. So we can move in and out of this hypnosis state. We do it all the time. Everybody can do this. This isn't something you cannot do, because you do it. And if if any of your listeners, Pete, or you yourself, have been to a hypnosis session and it's like, oh, it didn't work and they couldn't get me in, I'm not hypnotizable, I can't go into hypnosis. You can, you just didn't want to in that situation. The person made you feel uncomfortable, the room, the maybe it was some sort of academic, university situation, made you feel uncomfortable. You just didn't feel like it because you really didn't want to quit smoking or to change the habit or whatever. Like, it's not about control. It's not about brainwashing. You can't make anybody do anything they don't want to do. Even those Las Vegas shows, people are dancing like Michael Jackson and singing like Elvis Presley and barking like dogs and quacking like ducks. Everybody that gets up on this stage volunteered to be up there.
Yeah.
They want to be up there. They want to be star of the show. They want to have a good time. They want to have fun. They want a funny video to put on Instagram or something, go viral. And who's the hypnotist going to pick at one of those Las Vegas shows or comedy club shows? Are they picking the introvert at the back of a room, sitting in the shadows, sinking down in their chair so they won't be seen? Or are they picking the extrovert who got there early to sit in the front row and is jumping up and down saying, pick me, pick me?
Yeah.
You know, it's all about your intention and what you want to do. And what was fascinating about hypnotherapy, because a lot of the personal growth stuff that I was looking into in the 90s and even early 2000s, they would say something like in the back of the book or the blog post, once the internet was out there, or article in a magazine or something, it'd be like the 5 things you can do to change your life. And 4 of them would always be different, but one was always the same. It was always hypnotherapy. It's like these tools, these techniques allow you to access your own subconscious mind to create healing and resolution around hurt and pain, even if it was decades ago. And so I started looking into that, and I found somebody to work with, and I did some deep healing work and released and resolved a lot of those issues I had been dealing with for a couple of decades. And what's also fascinating about hypnotherapy, so it scratched that itch of healing and resolution around the hurt and pain I was dealing with. Another aspect of hypnotherapy is the more spiritual side of it.
Yeah.
It really started like informing upon my life because, and back in nowadays, you just go to Malibu or you go down to South America somewhere and do an ayahuasca ceremony, or go to somebody's, Wednesday evening in somebody's backyard and do an ayahuasca ceremony. And back then you couldn't do that kind of stuff. I'm sure there's states where it's still super illegal.
Yeah.
But now it's easier to deal, you got the internet, you can find these places. Back then you just couldn't do it. So, I mean, I was certainly nervous just due to my upbringing, religious upbringing, and just, I couldn't wrap my head around somebody just handing me some chemistry they made in their bathtub and calling it LSD and saying, okay, this will give you a great trip. And it's like, that always weirded me out. And so what other options is there? There's like prayer, meditation, hypnotherapy. And so hypnotherapy allows you again to tap into your own ability to, whether you call it your higher self or you call it God or you call it the energy of the universe or whatever you call it, tap into that, as all the science. And that was a big part of my book, the Past Lives Guidebook, is looking at the science and the biology of all this. Because what a lot of research is saying is this brain of ours is not a warehouse. It's not a self-storage unit of memory or consciousness. Consciousness is not imprisoned within the skull here. Consciousness is non-local, meaning it can move around. And a lot of that research to show that was done by the government in that remote viewing research they did in the 70s and 80s. And now this is where your show kind of starts maybe turning more into a little conspiracy theory show. But this is all real research the government did. You can actually look at it online on government research like CIA.gov. And all this research got released because of the Freedom of Information Act in the early 90s. And the government got real embarrassed that they were doing this weirdo woo-woo research around psychic ability and ESP and all that, trying to weaponize it because the Soviet Union was doing the same. So in the late 60s, the CIA found out, or it was implied that the Soviet Union was researching psychic ability, ESP, because wouldn't it be great if you could look into the Pentagon and see war plans or see troop movements or see into underground bunkers and all that. And so the CIA wanted to do the same again. And one of those, make a long story short, found some researchers at Stanford, and they started at least 25 years of research and experimentation around consciousness and psychic ability. And I'm guessing since it worked, because they were getting great results. If they didn't get any results, that program would have lasted 6 months and he would have gone somewhere else.
Yeah.
To look for answers. They spent about 25 years, millions of dollars, because it worked. They were getting some great results. And I'm guessing they're still doing it, because if it worked, why would they stop, even if they got embarrassed?
Yeah,
and found?
exactly. Like you said, if it would have been 6 months in, they're done. And then, well, we're 25 years into this thing and they're still looking at it. So obviously they're finding out something that they're liking, because, a lot of times they say we don't use we only use a small percentage of our brain. What if we unlock the rest? Like a lot of these other movies premise on, it's like, what if we unlock more part of our brain? What's the more power we could have, and what's the unlimited capabilities we could do with it though?
Yeah. Yeah. And so they probably just changed the name of the program and moved it to the office across the hall. So I'm guessing they're still doing it. But what was fascinating about it, and again, this is U.S. government research, they found that consciousness can move forward and backwards in time. And again, there's lots of books because there's so much was written about in the early 90s, and a lot of jokes and eye rolling was done about it. A lot of the people in the program started writing their own books. There's a lot of information about these programs. Stargate. And that's the other thing. It's just like you give them these dumb names like Stargate and all this things. Like, oh, man, it makes it sound very conspiratorial. But what's fascinating is they're doing legitimate research on consciousness and found that not only can it move across location, it can move forward and backwards in time. And so a lot, and other research has come out since then, in the last, whatever, 60 years, again, showing that consciousness is not imprisoned within the skull, and that the brain is not this kind of Raiders of the Lost Ark warehouse of information, memories, and housing of the consciousness, but that it's more of an antenna. Sort of like, here's, I got my phone here. I have the entire wisdom of the world here, but it's not in my phone. I'm accessing it. I'm pulling it in. This is like a big, huge antenna computer, and I'm pulling it in. Yeah, I got a couple of pictures. I got a couple of songs on here, a couple of apps, but the information of the world is not in my phone. I'm pulling it in like an antenna. And our brains seem to operate in a similar way, specifically looking at the pineal gland. That's what the book's all about, is looking at the science and the biology and even the history and what do different religions say about the reincarnation.
Yeah.
And lives like Hinduism and Buddhism and Judaism and Christianity and indigenous cultures from around the world. And it's fascinating, the history of it all, where it came from. I even go all the way back to starting with Neanderthal burial sites. And is there any indication on how Neanderthals 50,000 years ago buried their community, their tribe, their family, that they had thoughts about life after death?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's fascinating beyond belief. And it's been a slow drip. And the book was basically written due to my own skepticism and wanting to find out about this. Because again, this is a slow drip of using hypnotherapy, not only in my own life for healing, but then understanding it more as an access point to the more spiritual states I was fascinated by, to the point of like more of middle age. Like I had the opportunity to get some great training in this work and become a hypnotherapist myself and help people in this way. And so this has been like a slow drip over, since a teenager, since the early 90s, to getting trained about, 12 years ago. So it's been this slow drip of and widening of my worldview to the point where it's like, well, I wonder how true this really is. It's fascinating. And I kind of X-Files thing I want to believe, but is there any scientific validity behind any of this? Because the books like Brian Weiss and Dolores Cannon and all that are fun to read, but it's really about, somebody's specific experience. It doesn't explain why it could be happening. Because there's all sorts of different things, and people way smarter than me are still arguing over whether this reality of ours is a computer simulation, or is it a holographic universe, or is it the multiverse? Or
Yeah, see, the multiverse is what I was going to say too. You just beat me to the punch of that one. Is this another parallel universe of something else? Like some of these superhero shows. Like The Flash was one of those big ones that really highlighted it a lot in the '90s. Like when they were talking about how there were different Earths, so we're on Earth, whatever. There's different things that happen in reverse. Here, and like, are we in a parallel universe? Is there life outside of this galaxy? As we discovered, there's another whole another thing on the other side of this whole, stuff like that. We start exploring as we go.
Yeah. Well, it's that funny line in The Big Bang Theory, and Sheldon says something. Penny wants him to come dance with her or something. He says, "I believe in the multiverse, and in one of those universes, I'm a clown made of candy, but in none of them do I dance." And that's
Love
it's a
that
funny
show.
joke.
I
It's
love
funny
that
line.
show.
So itself, like, yeah, that's a real theory, real
Yeah.
scientific theory, that there's multiverses and multiple Craigs and multiple Petes, and
Yeah.
we're maybe doing similar things, very, very, very similar. And that's what's interesting about past life regression. When I'm working with somebody with past life regression, and maybe they go, I see it to be the 1970s. And you can kind of see the gears turning in their heads, like, well, time-wise, that doesn't make any sense, because they think it's going to be ancient Greece or Egypt back in, 5 BC or something. And they're helping build the pyramids 20,000 years ago or something. But it's like, no, I seem to be I'm an accountant in the 1970s, and it's like, it's not, a chariot driver, and it's not, back in the Civil War, or rowing the boat across to Delaware or whatever. I want to say it's plain, but it's like what they're looking at is trying to resolve some hurt and pain, maybe in their current life, and it's connected to this life they lived. And so what if it's the 70s or the 1980s even? It's just like doing a play, like a theater troupe doing a play. And they do a play like in January, and maybe it's a play from the 1960s.
Yeah.
Then maybe in March they go do a play, an ancient Greek tragedy, and then in May they do a Shakespeare play, and then they're doing in July they're doing a more modern play written in the 2000s. Timelines can jump around, and maybe they go in chronological order for fun, but maybe they're jumping around due to some theme they're
Mhm.
looking at. But same with our lives, and a lot of this information and the work I do is based on the research of Michael Newton, and two books that are incredible and really have influenced my view of the world and the work I do. And even the book I wrote is Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. The work he did with tens of thousands of people over the course of 40 years, he was doing the work. And now the Michael Newton Institute continues to do even more work. Michael Newton passed away, I think, in 2011 or something. But even the Michael Newton Institute released a book a couple of years ago, Wisdom of the Soul, something like that, I think. And it's not so much just looking at one person's story. They're looking at multiple people's stories. And especially those first two seminal books, The Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. What he was finding, he accidentally regressed somebody as a hypnotherapist working with somebody in 69. He wanted to regress them back to childhood, hoping that would help them release the pain they were dealing with, the trauma they were dealing with. Well, doing this hypnosis work, regressing them back to childhood to resolve and heal the issues that happened during childhood, the guy kept going. And he went past childhood, he went past being a newborn, and he went back to soul state, that time of being a soul before you arrive on earth. And he did great emotional healing work there. And so this fascinated Michael Newton. And he wonders, like, well, can other people do this? And can I help them get there? Because it was rather accidental that he did this. And so he spent some of the early 70s kind of perfecting, if you will, this protocol of getting people to that state. And then he started working with people just to see if the healing could be accomplished. And what he found is people were having similar experiences to each other. Now he's working with hundreds and hundreds of people, 365 days a year. And he worked with people over 20 years because he found that they kept having similar experiences to each other. This is the 70s. This is 80s. There's no internet, way to contact each other. No email, no text messages or anything. I'm sorry, my
Yeah.
phone's going.
You're
So I
good.
forgot to put it in airplane mode. My apologies. There it goes. And so he was working with people over the course of 20 years because they kept having similar experiences of this soul state, of this soul world. And so he started researching and compiling, and eventually came out with his book, Journey of Souls, in 1992. Did another 10 years worth of research, and released Destiny of Soul. That's kind of volume 2, which is even twice as big as the first book. It's like 30 years worth of research with tens of thousands of people, all having similar experiences to each other of this soul state. And one of the aspects that they kept coming back with is that we keep returning to this earth as a classroom again and again to learn and grow as souls. Not unlike maybe going to school, and somebody gets a master's degree at a university for mathematics. You just don't go and get a master's degree in mathematics. You have to study for years. You have to start in first grade with 2 + 2 = 4. And in the second grade, you learn subtraction. In the third grade, you learn your times tables. Fourth grade, you learn long division. Into high school, you're learning algebra and calculus and trigonometry. Then you're writing those crazy equations on the chalkboard, those Goodwill Hunting,
I was gonna say, good
equations.
hunting. You beat me to it.
Yeah, and but it took years to get there. You know, it took 12, 15 years to get to that master's degree of mathematics. And we may be doing something similar. If you look at each grade as a life, what if it takes multiple years, multiple lifetimes to learn something that we're here to master? And as an example, just as a broad general example, say somebody wants to learn about wealth and abundance. Well, the obvious thing was like, yes, learn, be a wealthy person and have a yacht and have a private plane and have the house in the south of France and all that stuff. And your own private, resort kind of ranch in Kauai or something, right next to Oprah. Uh, you can obviously understand a lot about wealth by being a wealthy person, but would it not also be helpful in understanding wealth and abundance to live in abject poverty in Calcutta?
Hmm.
Would it be helpful to understand what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck with 3 kids out of a mobile home in the Midwest somewhere? That sounds stereotypical about it, but it's just like, would it be helpful to learn these various aspects of wealth and abundance in order to get that master's degree, let alone love or compassion or empathy or something? And so we return again and again, according to the research done by Michael Newton and Michael Newton Institute over the last 60 years, to learn, to grow, to develop as souls, as spirits. And not unlike, the computer simulation theory, a computer simulation, let's say a flight simulator pilot needs to fly into London next week. Well, if they've never flown to London, they're going to want to practice, and they're going to get on their home computer, their flight simulator at home in a safe place in their home office or living room or something in the den. And they're going to practice flying to London. And what happens if there's terrible turbulence over the Atlantic? What happens if it's pouring rain at nighttime? What if they switch runways at the last minute? What if for some reason Heathrow shuts down? They have to fly to Gatwick Airport at the last minute. What are they going to do? They're going to practice all these various scenarios in a safe place, hoping they don't need it, when they actually fly there. But if something happens, they're prepared for it. That's what a flight simulator is helping you do. What if this world of ours is a computer simulation where we're learning, aspects of ourselves as souls, as spirits, as humans that we're going to need somewhere else?
Yeah.
And that's just the computer simulation theory, let alone holographic or multiverse or, whatever. And so it becomes very fascinating. It becomes head spinning at times. This could be a 10-hour conversation. We'd probably have more questions than answers by the end of it.
Right.
But that's where the book
But I
comes
mean,
from.
it's very
On this
fascinating though.
point.
You think about it, because what if it is a computer simulation? There's a lot of like Japanese cartoons that explored this option of what if you were living in a 3D world and you could be anybody you want to be, kind of thing. And it's like, all these things could change, and things like that too. And a lot of people like they frown upon certain things, but it's like, well, think about it. They're exploring these avenues. Like, what was it? The one I was watching was called Paprika, the one where like, what if mind control vices took over the world and these people were actually like hallucinating, like Inception was a little bit of it too, and things like that too. And the other thing I was thinking of, the men who stare at goats, when we were talking about the military
Oh, yeah.
experiment, that one too is a really good depiction of what you were basically talking about there. But I mean, it is a good question though. Think about it, like, because we've explored past lives on this show before. Than one guest, we had a woman that was from England that we were talking about, and she was talking about how she said that I would something to do. One of my past lives was like, I was like I was somebody not really heard before, but now I'm being heard now. And then she had mentioned another gentleman she had talked to that it kept having flashbacks of something that happened to him, and he doesn't have any idea what it was, but it was going back to some past life he was in a totally different scenario, nothing like Greek or nothing else. It was like I think it was like the 1960s, if I remember right. He was a cop or something, and unfortunately the cop in this past life got stabbed to death, and he kept wondering why he had having this fear of knives and couldn't figure out what it was, and then it was linked to that. So it's all really fascinating to me, because I was like, damn, I was like interesting. I'm like, well, that's really cool. Because like what about other people's past lives? They may not know, and then when we explored hypnotherapy, one of our guests in this season, she actually didn't know she was actually sexually assaulted, because at 3 years old she was, but her brain cut off that memory so she wouldn't know, but her body remembered it though. So when she was doing hypnotherapy, her hypnotherapist kept saying, hey, there's something we need to talk about, but wouldn't say what it was at first. So it's all fascinating to me. As soon as anytime I see a hypnotherapist, and I'm like, oh yeah, let's go. Because I love these conversations, because the things you guys do, and I think people misunderstand a lot of this stuff. It's like you can dig deeper past that first mental barrier in your wall, in your mind that protects on things. You can get deeper in, and you can see things that you may not even know. Like that guest didn't even know that this even happened to her. She had no idea,
Right.
but her body remembered it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's that famous book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the work I do in terms of the more therapeutic side of the clinical hypnotherapist, as opposed to more spiritual hypnotherapy, is starting with that feeling state in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Because we just don't, in and of itself, want to start looking for traumatic memories. Because even somebody's like, I don't know, I can't. A lot of people could be, I can't remember my childhood, and I think something happened. My parents or my aunts and uncles always act weird when I'm around, and I think something happened when I was a kid. I want to find out what it is. It's like, well, I don't do that kind of work because you just don't want to go look for traumatic
Yeah, no, I agree.
memory. If there is one, okay, I guess there obviously can be some resolution and healing work around that. But if there isn't one, and the computer code command is to find a traumatic event, the mind will create a traumatic event. That's where a lot of that false memory syndrome stuff came up in the 90s and 1990s, is because counselors and hypnotherapists and things, especially working with children, were asking very, very leading questions. And so the subconscious mind and just a kind of human being wanting to be accepted and get approval was like, okay, well, you want me to find a traumatic event? Well, how about this? You know, and a lot of people had their lives destroyed and went to jail even, only to find out later that, oh, it never happened. It was a false memory, because the subconscious mind, wanting just to appease computer code commands, just came up with something that wasn't real. And so we don't necessarily want to look for a traumatic event. So we start with the feeling in the body, because the mind understands why that feeling state is there, whether you describe it as anxiety or depression or anger or resentment or regret or disappointment or whatever, however it's defined, however it's felt in the body, that can only be created by brain chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Say, for example, anxiety. The brain has to start creating the hormones adrenaline and cortisol, and the neural peptides, these molecules the brain creates, that send the message of anxiety or anger or disappointment or frustration or joy or happiness to the cells of the body. So that's why you get that feeling state. You can tell the difference between anger, anxiety, joy, and happiness because of these neural peptides. Well, the only way the brain is changing chemistry in this way is through a thought, conscious or unconscious. So you know why you're doing it. Yeah, but maybe unconscious, but that's the brilliance of hypnotherapy and these techniques,
Mm-hmm.
is by quieting down that conscious level of mind, that logical, analytical part of mind, quieting that down and then accessing behind the veil into the subconscious mind, that filing cabinet where all these files have been kept of the hurt and pain, maybe even since you were a little kid, and seeing which one is being triggered. Why is the alarm system of anxiety and anger or fear going off?
Yeah.
And that feeling state from the body of fear or anxiety or anger is directly connected to the thought, maybe unconscious thought, that is creating it. So let's follow it that way. You know why you're doing it, not consciously. That's why sometimes talk therapy can be very frustrating. I think talk therapy can be very helpful, very useful, very healing. But sometimes people find themselves spinning their wheels because they don't know what the problem is. Your subconscious mind knows. That's why you keep getting that feeling state, or the self-sabotage, or the habits of needing to numb yourself with doom scrolling or video games or drinking or pills or whatever the thing may be. You know why you're doing that, why you're protecting yourself, why you're trying to self-soothe. And so it's these techniques and these tools of therapeutic hypnosis help you access that part of your mind. And this is where the control comes back, because in and of itself, you're already out of control. Somebody's dealing with anxiety, maybe disrupting their life, and they don't know why they're doing it. You're already out of control.
Yeah.
So what this is going to do is give you back control. And I can't make anybody, as you probably already discussed on your shows before, I can't make anybody do anything they don't want to do.
Yeah.
That's why smoking cessation, why, what hypnotherapy is most known for, helping people quit smoking, why it's not 100% guarantee. Because if you don't want to quit smoking, you're not going to quit smoking. If somebody's wife or husband sets up the appointment, say, okay, they're going to quit smoking. I'm tired of the cost. I'm tired of the health implications later in life. I'm tired of the smell. And the husband, the wife shows up for the appointment and they're like, nah, I don't want to quit smoking. We'll do a couple of sessions and I'll tell them it didn't work, and I'll smoke in the garage. It's like they don't want to quit, so they're not going to quit. Otherwise, I could go to every Las Vegas casino and bar and just make people quit smoking, and everybody'd be healthier. I'd be able to go to every prison and hypnotize everybody to be law-abiding, upstanding citizens, and I'd shut down the prison system. I'd be able to hypnotize my way into the United Nations and hypnotize all the world leaders to create world peace. I'd be the guy who ended war. I'd be that guy. They'd
Yeah.
celebrate and sing songs about me. But I can't do that because that's not how it works. This is not a control mechanism. And even again, like those shows in Las Vegas or comedy clubs, it's like everybody gets up there, wants to be in the show.
Yeah.
And even if they want to be up there and they get up there and they all of a sudden realize, oh my God, 100 people are staring at me now. I'm under these bright lights. And they get really nervous. They'll be excused from the stage, because they're going to do a little practice thing. And hypnotist is going to look for little subtle cues, like a magician is looking for subtle cues. You're going to look for subtle cues like the facial muscles drooping a little bit, maybe the eyes darting around as they're closed, maybe even picking up the arm and just dropping it and seeing if it's loose and limp. And if it's not, if they're really tight and, stressed, you're not going to do a good show.
Yeah.
That's why they get like 12, 15 people up there, because 2 or 3 of them are going to be excused. Because you can't make anybody do anything they don't want to do.
Exactly.
And their stress levels go up and it's like, oh, I don't want to do this. It's like you see the videos on YouTube, like the street hypnosis, and somebody's just walking up to somebody who's like, sleep. And then they like that. It's like, that was rehearsed. That was rehearsed the week before. And so they could try to get a viral video going for their show or for their clinic or whatever they're doing. It's like, I don't dare anybody to do this because it's not going to end well for you. But, think about what would happen if you walked up to some stranger in the street and went, sleep. They're going to punch you in the face and then run away because they don't know what's going on. This is a weirdo coming up to me and yelling at me, sleep. It's like, even if you're trained in how to do that, it's still just like, it's frightening. You're going to you're going to tense up and react in a self-preservation way, not just droop down. Like that's just like an act doing that. You can't make anybody do anything they don't want to do. So what do you want to do? You want to create healing? You want to create more confidence in life? You want to access the more spiritual side of life? It's like, you're allowed to do that. And while ayahuasca ceremonies and maybe even microdosing or doing LSD or whatever the thing is, yeah, that can be helpful and stuff. What I like about hypnotherapy is the control it gives you. There's that word again. Because in and of itself, you can't control an ayahuasca experience or an LSD experience, but you can control the hypnotherapeutic experience.
Yeah.
And using that in a more spiritual way, and even doing something like past life regression or moving up in that soul state or connecting with ancestors or whatever the work is you're interested in doing, you're allowed to do. You have the hardware of this brain, this antenna, what a lot of research in science, what I write in the book, a lot of the research in science of this is showing that the brain is more of a receiver and transmitter of information. There's a lot of, what did I do with it? Well, I'll find it here in a second. Actually, hold on a second. Time out. Just real quick, since I have it right here in my briefcase. There's this research study that came out, I think it was 2020, Frontiers in Psychology. I don't know if this is backwards to everybody.
No, you're
but
good.
The common basis of memory and consciousness, understanding the brain as a right read head interacting with an omnipresent background field. And that's a lot of fancy language. Well, what I was saying is, again, this brain of ours isn't a warehouse, isn't a storage unit of memory, but it's a receiver and transmitter. And a lot of people look at this is the kind of graphic. So if you're just audio listening on audio, I apologize, but here's a little diagram of the brain and the pineal gland. It's like a rice-sized piece of the brain. Its main job is melatonin production. But this other research came out, I think, 2014. This one says, new crystal in the pineal gland, characterization of potential role in electromechanotransduction. Again, a bunch of fancy language, but what it's saying is this pineal gland, again, main job is melatonin production, the hormone that puts us to sleep at night as the sun goes down. And then as the sun rises, melatonin production ceases, cortisol levels go up, and we wake up. Well, what this research paper found is that the pineal gland is filled with these little crystals. And if you're just listening to audio, If you Google search pineal gland crystals and go to images, you'll see these crystals. And in this rice-sized piece of the brain, there is 40,000 of these crystals in this rice-sized piece of the brain. They have nothing to do with melatonin production. There's no evolutionary need for these crystals. But what that research paper was just talking about is it creates a transducer effect. Like there's a lot of crystals out there, like quartz crystals, that when mechanical pressure is applied, creates a electrical charge, electromagnetic field. And our brains, when mechanical pressure is applied to these crystals in the pineal gland, electromagnetic field can be measured in our brain. And what this research paper is suggesting is that it creates a transducer effect. So like back in the day, we had a car radio and a little antenna on the hood. And there's, if you're in a big city, a really big city, you might have 50 radio stations between the news and talk radio and sports, and then all the music, classical and hip hop and jazz and rock and whatever country. You could potentially have 50 radio stations, but when you turn on your car radio, you don't get that white noise of every radio station. You're pulling in one signal. And that signal is determined by where on the little dial your radio is tuned to. So the antenna is vibrating microscopically to pull in that one signal. There's a tiny little transducer in your radio, which turns that frequency into audio. Our TVs back in the day, not anymore because it's all internet and all that kind of stuff. But back in the day, we had antennas on our house or on those rabbit ears on our TVs. And when I wanted to watch my TV show, Cheers, on Thursday night at 9:00, I had to turn on my TV, turn it to channel 10. The rabbit ears on my TV or the antenna on my house started vibrating microscopically to attract that one signal of all the radio signals and TV signals and microwaves and nowadays Wi-Fi and cell tower stuff. Pulled in that one signal, pulled it through and that frequency with my transducer and my TV turned it into image and sound so I could watch my TV show. That's what this paper is suggesting the pineal gland is doing, pulling in frequencies. And that other research paper said the omnipresent background field is where all this is stored. Sort of like the servers at a university or Google or those big server farms holds all the information and my phone pulls it in. Well, the omnipresent background field, what that is suggesting is that in an atom, when you take an electron microscope, you start looking at what's an atom? The atoms that form me, that create Pete, that create this desk and my microphone and my furniture in my house. All the atoms, if you look at an atom, it has electrons, the neutrons, and then subatomic particles like quarks and things. And then the very essence of an atom is that vibrational field. And that's what it's saying is holding all this information. That's what we're tuning into. With all this biology in our brains, so our brain becomes an antenna or a radar dish.
Yeah.
To not only receive information, but put out information into the universe.
That's pretty cool, though. I mean, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Just because, we do have electrical pulses that go through our body, so it would make sense some sort of thing like that happening possibly too. And that's really interesting though to know though. But that's I mean, I'm not against it. I don't see it not being a possibility though with a lot of things that happen these days, because remember they used to think the aliens were going to steal our brainwaves, so people would put foil hats on to protect their we all thought they were crazy, but apparently not. This research is saying otherwise. It may be a strong possibility we do put out things like that, though. So, but Craig, as we get ready to start wrapping up this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety Man, I want to ask you two questions. Now, the first one's kind of a fun question, like that's live to guess, and I'm very interested to know your answer to this question. So the question is to you is that if your mental health had a song, what would you say that song would be? Everybody loves this question. I'm telling you, I get the same response. Everybody laughs when they hear it. They're like, man, that's a great question.
And this is just where my mind went. The first song that came to me was Helter Skelter by the Beatles. And then the other one was Disco Inferno.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Burn. Disco Inferno.
I love it.
I had some time and I'd probably find a more eloquent, graceful song, but those are the first two songs.
Oh no, that's a great answers though. That's hilarious though, because Helter Skelter is the first time it's shown up by the Beatles. I think the Beatles are the first entry of the Beatles since I've been asking this question to people because it's always fun to see what their responses are to it. And Disco Inferno is a good one too, though. I mean, because for a lot of people, that's just what you're feeling in the moment. Like you're just first song that came to your mind, boom, that's what it is. Usually, it's one of those fun questions to throw people off just to see what they say. So my
Yeah.
next
Well,
question,
and the first answer is usually the most accurate.
all right?
And I think just in terms of the chaos of the world right now, as we record this,
Yeah.
just what it feels like in life right now.
Yep.
Um, yeah.
So, Craig,
Yeah.
my next question for you, and the main reason I start this podcast, that is if you could break the stigma about mental health. Now, when I ask this question to you, it's anything that you just get tired of people asking you about, like, anything that you feel like you hear somebody talking about, you're just like, man, I wish you'd stop believing that. That's not really right. What would you say that one thing would be?
I would say two parts. Of course, the whole thing about hypnotherapy being mind control and brainwashing, and I don't want people looking into my conscious mind and giving away my secrets, which is not a thing. I get frustrating after so many years of trying to explain and so much research out there now on how helpful hypnotherapy can be. But in terms of mental health itself, I would say, I think what the misnomer is that depression and anxiety and anger and regret and resentment are not so much states of being that just inform this is how you are, but are more like warning signals, sort of like somebody pulling the fire
Hmm.
alarm and sirens go off, the strobe lights go off, warning everybody if there's danger. Well, your subconscious mind's main job is to keep you safe and protected. And we also have a warning system, but instead of sirens and lights, we have feeling states. And so if the feeling state in your body is telling you and feels like anxiety, it's like the different sirens, so you can tell what's a fire truck, what's an
Yeah.
ambulance, and what's a car, or you can tell in a movie that's obviously we're in Britain because it has that funny police siren that it
Hmm.
does. Like there's different sirens. Well, we have different alarm systems too. And whether you want to define it as depression or anxiety or fear or anger or something else, we have these warning systems. And so it's not that there's really something wrong with you. It's why do you feel you're in danger? What is your mind trying to warn you about through this feeling state in your body? So it's not that there's something wrong with you. You're not broken. It's just that something in your world is dangerous. Now, it may be a slight thing, it may be even an imagined thing, because that's kind of the issue of being human. Our minds can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. But and in and of itself, that yes, a fire's not coming towards your house, of an attacker's not coming at you with a knife, and that kind of life threatening danger. But there's something, whether at work or in family or relationship or something in life, that is sending out these warning signals. You're not broken. It's just that something in your life is being perceived as dangerous, maybe because of something that happened a long time ago and it maybe kind of looks familiar. And so the alarm systems are going, we don't want this to happen again. So let's warn you. The problem is the subconscious mind speaks in a more metaphoric and symbolic way. And so, and the warning systems is feeling state.
Hmm.
So it's unfortunately just doesn't hand you a card and say, here's the problem. Like those error messages you sometimes get on the computer that actually tell you what the problem is. It unfortunately doesn't do this. And the other aspect of being human, what you practice, you get better at.
Yeah.
That's great. If you want to learn the piano or the guitar or learn dance or learn martial arts, learn to walk as a kid, learn to ride a bicycle. What you practice, you get better at. Unfortunately, if you're practicing anxiety, you're practicing fear, practicing being angry, you're just going to get really good at that. But again, one great set of tools and techniques, hypnotherapy, can help release and resolve a lot of that so you can start practicing something else. So I think that was a long answer to a
I
short
think it's a great
question.
answer, though. I think it was a really detailed, great answer to things too, because I feel the same way. My anxiety, when it kicks up, usually is indicating to me that something's wrong. I have a feeling like I can sense something's not right, and I'm not sure what it is, but I know something is going on, or I need to be somewhere, or something's telling me, "Hey, man, be alert of something." So you're not wrong. I love the answer. It to other people may be lengthy, but that was a great explanation, though, Craig. I really liked how you broke that down for me because it makes a lot of sense. But Craig,
Well,
thank you so
and
much.
thanks.
No,
You
go
want
ahead.
really quickly? I know we got to go. Just really quick, because I want to add upon what you just
Yeah, go
said.
ahead.
And in and of itself, I don't think we want to get rid of anxiety and fear completely. That's what keeps us safe. That's what keeps us from walking down the dark alley. Because you're saying when I feel anxious, I look in my life and see what's dangerous. You want those warning systems. You just don't want it at a volume of 10, 24 hours a day, 7
Mhm.
days a week. That fear, that anxiety keeps us from walking down the dark alley at midnight, even though it's a shortcut home, from peering over the edge of the Grand Canyon too far, from petting the nice rattlesnake or the scorpion or something. That fear and anxiety keeps us from doing that. So that's great. It keeps us safe. It keeps us alive. It's just when it kind of runs on a pretty chronic state at a volume level of 10 that it becomes a problem.
No, Craig, I think that was a great answer. Like I said, man, I loved it. And thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me today. I really enjoyed this conversation. I thought it was very
Yeah,
insightful.
me too.
I thought we really covered a lot of interesting topics with it too and everything else like that. So I appreciate you spending the time with me hanging out. Craig, before we start signing off, do you want to let everybody know where they can find you? Tell them where they can buy the book, man. I know it's out already. I know I got my copy here with me. I got to finish reading, but guys, go check out Craig's book. Craig, tell them where they can find it at.
Yeah, of course, you can find it at Amazon, Past Lives Guidebook, at barnesandnoble.com, potentially at your local bookstore if they have those kind of books. The best way to get in touch with me, there's two ways. The more clinical side of thing is Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy. I know that's a mouthful. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, but do most of my sessions over Zoom. And so I work with people around the country, around the world. In fact, I've had the unique pleasure of working with people from Iceland and Tahiti
Oh,
and
that's really cool.
Bulgaria. I mean, they're Americans. They just happen to be in Bulgaria, Iceland, and Tahiti. But if you go to the Google machine and you search Flagstaff Hypnosis, you'll see Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy pop up. That's me. If you're interested in more spiritual side of things, of course, the Past Lives Guidebook on Amazon, but also Sacred Mystery Hypnotherapy. And that's a lot more of the work I do on the spiritual side of things.
I love it, Craig. Well, thank you so much for coming and hang out with us today, man. Like I said, I've really had a great time being here. I do have my copy. I got to finish reading though, but I've been enjoying so far. The
I
books.
know it's a big book. My wife teases me all the time. It's just like what a 200-page book turned into a 450-page book. So,
Well, it gives me something to read, man. I got a stack of books I have to read through. So I read them, I get a bunch of them all the time, and I appreciate every time somebody sends me one. So I do take the time to read them. It does take me a little bit with everything else that goes on, but it's something great to do in my free time, man. When I need a little something to get away from everything, just find a nice spot, just sit down, and start reading. People ask what I'm reading all the time. Hey, what are you reading this time? And and things like that too. So it's always great when I get these new things to check out. But thank you so much for coming to hang out with us. Do you have any final words you'd like to say to everybody at home?
I just say, once again, I already said it, but I think what is important for us as human beings, what you practice, you get better at. So notice in your life what you're practicing, and maybe anxiety and fear and anger, and know that you can turn that around. And part of the process is practicing gratitude and joy and happiness. There's a practice to it. So
I love it.
when you practice, you get better at. So what do you want in your life?
I love you. Thank you so much, guys. That was Craig Meriwether, guys. And with that being said, we're going to wrap up this episode of Pete for Anxiety. You know where to find me? I'm Pete for Anxiety on X all the way down to TikTok. I'm on Spotify all the way down to Pandora Radio. And as I always say, it costs nothing absolutely to be kind to somebody. One kind act you could do could save someone's life, or hell, you can make their day. I'm Pete for Anxiety. Sign off saying, don't ask how your day is today. Say, hey, how's your mental health?